Welcome back to Pivot Points. I'm your host, Dave Allen, founder of Brand Pi, the brand consultancy working with businesses to deliver impact at pivotal moments in their journey. A young Ed Meyercord grew up in New York City, fascinated by ambitions of Wall Street, but under the surface, he always had the itch to run something of his own. He's now been at the helm of Extreme Networks for over 10 years, proving that the potent combination of ambition and people-focused growth is a winning combo. The reach of Extreme Networks ranges from the Burj Khalifa to Old Trafford, and from Taylor Swift concerts to Samsung, cementing themselves in a market like no other. Join Ed as he shares the pivotal moments that gave him the art of perspective in business, inspired collaborative change within his teams, and helped him to build one of business's great titans. I'm really excited to have Ed Meyercord, CEO of Extreme Networks, today. Ed, could you just spend a little bit of time introducing yourself and maybe talk about some of the pivotal moments that you've had in your illustrious career?
Certainly. And first, let me say thank you for having me. It's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Yeah, I've taken maybe an unusual route to my current position. I started off on Wall Street and had many different positions on Wall Street, but as an investment banker, when I made a leap out into the industry, I got into the telecoms industry, working for a public company then, and then we were acquired, had an experience with a private equity owned business, running that business as well. It's the first time I became a CEO, and I was very young and quite frankly didn't know what I was doing. And then, evolved. I got involved with a pure startup. It was sort of a technology recycling play. At the same time, I got introduced to Extreme Networks, where we were a customer of Extreme. And the founder of Extreme reached out and asked if I would consider joining the board of the company, which I did. And then fast forward, there were changes afoot. And then I ended up becoming chairman of the board. And then 10 years ago, hard to believe, it's been 10 years, with changes going on at the company, I became CEO. And I think it's fair to say, the 10 years have flown by. At the time, I'm not sure we expected my journey at the top of Extreme to be 10 years, but here we are, still going strong. And as we talked about earlier, we just had our user conference in Paris, and oversubscribed, kind of best ever. We're innovating in technology, so it's we're still having fun, and we kind of feel like a startup, even though the company's almost 30 years old.
So I'm going to go back a little bit in time and talk about investment banking. What attracted you to investment banking, and how did you find that, and the whole thing of the responsibility that goes with those massive investments? Because it was a fairly big player that I think you worked for.
That's right. Well, it started it started out with a fascination around Wall Street. I grew up around New York City. New York is really, financial capital of the world. I guess we could pick, is it London? Is it New York? But that's kind of the major industry. So, when I went to school, everybody was thinking about, Wall Street and, potential opportunities there. I was fortunate to have an entree after my sophomore year in college to get a summer job. It was not a glamorous job whatsoever, but it was a foot in the door. I did a nice job. They asked me back for the next summer. And then because I had 2 years of experience, I was able to get into a great training program. And that was a company called Payne Weber. What was unique about this is that it was a rotational training program. It just wasn't banking. So you moved around at different areas of the firm. So I was in a retail branch, for example, cold calling customers. I worked for a commodities trader who had this quantitative model that he was using, and he's become a very famous guy who I worked with. I was in London in equity research with an analyst covering French banks. I worked in investment banking in the financial institutions group. So I was able to move around and have a lot of different experiences on Wall Street before I joined the investment banking team as an associate. They also did a nice thing where they funded my MBA. It was a lot of work because it was full-time being an associate investment banking and getting an MBA in 2 years. So not a lot of sleep, but that's how we moved. I later moved to Salomon Brothers. Salomon is more well-known, and Salomon, I think, was a tier one banking player. We were going head to head with Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs and Merrill Lynch, at the time. And that was kind of the introduction to kind of much bigger players doing bigger deals.
What were your big learnings, sort of leadership learnings from those early days in investment banking? What were your takeaways?
Yeah, it was interesting because what people might not understand is that investment banking organizations, they have a very flat work structure. So, as a junior person, in my case, I went there as an associate and then later became a VP, but it's very flat. So, I would have maybe an analyst below me or, one tier below me. And then I had a managing director that I was working with. And then we were dealing with CEOs and CFOs of companies. So here all of a sudden, maybe in a larger business, it takes a while to kind of work up the ranks to kind of get that exposure. But it was pretty amazing to have that exposure. I think that the other thing, that the big learning is that we were having to model businesses, so we were putting together financial models to the wee hours of the morning all the time, and it really gives you an interesting perspective of a business, like what are the business drivers, et cetera. So aside from traditional accounting, what we had is a really good insight on, okay, what are the drivers to driving the top line, and what are the drivers to margins, and what are the drivers to operating expense, and when you put businesses together, where do synergies come from? And there's a lot of work. In my case, I was working and raising money for telecom media tech companies in the TMT group at Solomon Brothers, and then also doing M&A. And so there's some very large M&A deals that I was a part of, and all the work and the planning that goes behind those deals from a banking side, and the insight was just kind of opening up a new world in terms of how it all works, and how people go about thinking about their strategies, and specifically strategies of merging or acquiring other businesses.
I mean, when did you start to get the sort of desire for, I want to run something, and start become a leader? Was that in you at an early age, or has it always been in you? Or
I hate to say it, I always have that in me.
Why am I not surprised?
I always have that in me, like I'm going to run something, but I didn't. What's interesting is I never even considered financial services, and in my MBA class, it's really interesting. Some of my classmates in my executive MBA have gone on and done just amazing things running financial services companies, huge financial services companies. And at the time, I never thought that was a path for me to actually stick in the game and then run a financial services company. I don't know why, but I felt like I needed to sort of jump out into the telecom and tech industry to have that shot. And I was thinking, my first play would be to sort of move into a CFO position, and then ultimately, potentially, a CEO role. So that was really the kind of the mindset. I had a few opportunities. The problem is there's you get paid well on Wall Street, and then if you're going to go to a sort of a normal corporation or firm, it's hard for them to pay you what you get paid on Wall Street. So it becomes kind of
you can get stuck.
Well, you have to you kind of have to move into a really good position as you're contemplating pay. Yeah.
And what were the triggers that flipped you into your first CEO role? Was there somebody spotted your talent, or was it you driving that? Or
I've always been just gravitated by where are the problems, what do we need to fix, and kind of diving in and trying to solve problems. And I left Wall Street, and I had a kind of a anecdote that I had shared earlier about my boss was very successful, very, very brilliant guy. And as someone said, he didn't have great table manners. In other words, he was a brilliant guy, but he was very rough around the edges. I'll put it that way. And
hard to work for, as we would say.
And he was really frustrated because I wasn't going to work for him. And finally, and we're negotiating, and I just moved into a new house. We moved out of New York City. My son was 1 year old, and he said, screw you, double it, double everything. And I was like, what? Did I hear you? And it's like salary, bonus, equity. And we're literally moving into our new house. And I went in and I told my wife, I'm like, honey, you're not going to believe this, but I think we're changing jobs. That's 3 hours away. And oh, by the way, we're going to move. But I learned a lot from him because he was a super, super smart guy. And then, he kind of, he became worth over $1 billion at that time.
Wow.
That was a lot of money. he kind of wandered off the reservation a bit, and I think he agreed to step down. He wasn't doing good things for the company.
Mm.
And so we hired Spencer Stewart and went out, and yeah, I was kind of front and center on the search. And we hired a great operator, a guy who was 21 years in a Jack Welch division, running a telecom business in the US, became a lifelong mentor for me. And, he was really the guy. He made me CFO of the company. And then over time, he said, Ed, you're solving all the problems. You don't realize it. You don't even realize it, but you're actually running the company. And I will say, things weren't going swimmingly. So we had an adverse ruling from the FCC. Michael Powell decided to effectively eliminate the platform we were using to deliver, at that time, local and long distance phone service.
Wow.
And fundamentally just completely erased our business model. At which point, my mentor and the chairman and CEO of the company said, "Hey, Ed, field promotion." And I was like 37 years old. You're running the company anyway. You do this. It's a young man's game. So in a way, I was really fortunate to have that opportunity because, at that age, as I mentioned before, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I will say I had a great mentor in this guy, Gabe Batista, who really taught, how do you run a meeting? How do you build a business plan? How do you all of these, things that quite frankly, you don't learn on Wall Street. And so I had the benefit of him as a mentor and work with him. And then, it was a very different game. And then when you're CEO of the company, you own everything.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, I mean, what did it feel like emotionally? Because you go from that, I can consult, I can give advice, I can sort of suggest what people do, to suddenly the buck stops with you and people start doing everything you ask them to do. And that's a
in theory.
In theory.
I don't think everyone. Yeah, wouldn't that be nice if everyone just did what you asked them to do? Yeah, and it doesn't work that way.
No, I know.
But on one hand, it was exhilarating, it was exciting, it was a new opportunity, and quite frankly, I always have had great people around me, and we had a great team, and we put together a strategy. I mean, I think first and foremost, you have to put together a strategy you believe in. And even if the bar is high, in which case, we set a very high bar for a rather unlikely turnaround. And everyone got really motivated and charged up, and we did it. It was a little, on the other hand, it's a little terrifying. You take a roll and the stock goes from 9 to, $1.50. And it's a little terrifying.
Yeah.
And you sort of own that. And then, there's everything that comes with it. At the time, we attracted short sellers, and there was just a lot of different characters that came into the game. But our team did a great job. The people rallied. We executed. We got the stock back up to 9 before we sold again. So, from a value creation standpoint, from the street, et cetera, we did a nice job. But I think it was really the victories we had as far as the operating plan. We put together. We basically had think about it as like a facilities less platform, where we basically didn't have to deploy our own equipment out into the field, where we had to become facilities based. And then we had to deploy networks everywhere where we had customers. We had to be judicious about where we deployed equipment, and where we were deploying equipment, they didn't want us to be there. The bell companies didn't want us to put equipment there. So it was a very challenging operating environment. But we executed and we did well. And ultimately a larger company that had a big fiber optic network and was private equity owned, it really wanted to acquire us, and we ended up selling the company. But we had a really good run. And so for me, it was pretty rewarding, kind of bringing the company to that point, and then really just the team and how well the team executed.
When you're in those sorts of moments where you've got to lead some sort of transformation and get the business back on track, how important is the rational versus the emotional side? So, you can build the rational strategy, but when you're thinking about that, how important is it to get people really emotionally on board, and how do you do that?
That is an excellent question. It plays into kind of what we're doing today at Extreme. It's a combination of both. There's a balancing act there. I mean, first of all, you have to have a strategy that's sound, but you also have to have people who are really passionate about driving and executing on a plan, which means change. in my commentary, and I talk about this all the time inside of Extreme, is there's going to be conflict. When there's change, there's going to be conflict because people have to change. And inherently, as humans, people don't want to change, right?
Mm.
So people kind of get into their routines and they don't want to change. So, when you're trying to get people to change, it can be, rough stuff. And you have to convince people. And that's where you sort of start playing at the heartstrings and the emotions of getting people to convince and inspired to change. And, I talk about constructive versus destructive conflict. And that's kind of my rule of, at the end of the day, you need to, you have to be objective, and you have to find a way to be objective. Conflict, you need it to drive change, but you have to keep people objective. I think a lot of the executive leadership function is for people to keep people objective and, keep people motivated. And I think, to a certain degree, everybody's coin operated. I mean, people want to make money in their career, and we want our people to make money, certainly. But it's some of the other things that really get people motivated when you bring a new technology to market, for example, and it's really well received. When you win a big deal and you sell like a really big customer in a competitive environment, that's what's energizing the people day in and day out.
No, and Extreme Networks is a quoted company, and that must bring additional pressures to leadership. When I've done the work I do, where I'm going around talking to employees or talking to leadership, I've never yet met an employee that gets out of bed to create shareholder growth and gets excited by that idea. So how do you balance that tension of ownership and the mobilization of your people? Because that must bring quite a pull to the life of a leader in a quoted company.
Yeah, and you know what, I think the issue in the as being in a quoted company is around a time horizon. And I think a lot of reasons why people want to take a quoted company off the market because maybe they have a longer term strategy they want to execute, and dealing with Wall Street through kind of quarterly ups and downs or quarterly change. If you're trying to fundamentally invest in a longer term plan, can be difficult, especially given the gyrations in the market. And we've had so many at Extreme with things kind of coming into play, maybe completely beyond our control, like COVID, or like, an oversupply situation. And, we have to manage that. And sometimes it's complicated managing it on a public stage, but I think it depends on the quality of governance in terms of your board. In our case, we have a great board. They all have operating experience. They all understand when we put together a plan, it's going to turn out differently. I mean, it always does. And so they're tough and they're difficult, but at the same time they're realistic and they're reasonable in terms of kind of how they work with us as a leadership team. And then at the end of the day, we have to set goals that are realistic. We can't set goals that are too lofty, and we have to agree at the end of the day, I mean, as a leadership team, and then push that down. And then when we put that behind us, then it's the chase, and then we go run after it.
Yeah. And how easy do you find it to get your leadership team aligned? When you're going through one of those moments and getting everybody aligned before before the bus or the train leaves the station. Yeah, I've interviewed so many organizations where the CEO thinks everybody's aligned, and then you talk to them and no, they're not.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's difficult because you have conflicting goals and people have conflicting experiences depending on where you sit at the company. If you're sitting at the company and like right now, what's the number one technology investment on everyone's mind? Okay. Everyone's thinking about AI, okay? And even if I sit on a council of CEOs in Silicon Valley, and the boards, everyone wants to know, like, what are your use cases for AI? How are you going to leverage AI? And this is true. Executive management is bringing that down to kind of middle management. How are we going to leverage AI? And it's top of mind for everyone in the technology space. So in a way, it's kind of cool, right? We're going to be using new technology, and we're going to be finding sort of new ways to drive outcomes and and a very transformative technology. On the other hand, the car's got to, it still has to roll down the highway, and you're rolling fast, and you have to take care of your existing customers. And so while you innovate, you also have to support an
Yeah.
existing business. So how much do you spend on the old versus how much do you spend on the new? How aggressive do you want to be in calling growth in a market? In our case, we're calling growth. Yeah, our sales leaders are confident. We've done a lot of things in terms of how we've improved our leadership team. We're in a position now like we've never been before. So the strength of our team and my confidence in the team's ability to execute has never really been higher. And as a result, we're calling kind of more aggressive numbers. But how aggressive do you want to be?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then
Well, it's a balance, isn't it?
it's a balance. And then the problem that we have is if we're too aggressive, and then you get into the year and you're counting on that revenue and it doesn't come. But if you're counting on the revenue to fund your investments, then you have to defund investments.
Oh yeah, been there, done that.
Which we've all been there and done that, which is it's the place nobody wants to be. Like
Yeah.
you're out over your skis maybe, or whatever people want to say, and you've reached a little too far and you've invested behind it, and now you can't afford the investment because you have all these stakeholders that you have to balance.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And for the folks that don't know Extreme, I mean, you do some incredibly amazing things, and some of the stadium that you help people use. I mean, just talk a little bit about some of the things you do, because I think people will be amazed, because I bet most of the people listening to this are using Extreme without realizing it.
They might not realize it. And, you bring it up, and we have amazing customers around the world. I was just over, we have employees who are in India, and on the way I stopped in Dubai. The largest building in the world is the Burj Khalifa, and it runs on Extreme and the mall around it. And then
Wow.
the first casino in the Middle East, which is going up in RAK, and it's a massive project, billions and billions of dollars. Well, that's running on Extreme. And when you get a FedEx package, FedEx distribution runs on Extreme technology. So it's run through an Extreme network before it gets to you. The floor of the New York Stock Exchange runs on Extreme. And as you mentioned, stadiums, here in the United States, the NFL, Major League Baseball, NASCAR, soccer, you look at the leagues and these stadiums, and Extreme is prevalent and critical and delivering sort of networking solutions. And we have Man U, we have Liverpool, Olympia Stadium, Berlin, and we're starting to grow our stadium business in Europe. Samsung, that small electronics company that's Korea based, runs Extreme.
Wow.
We have airports and government buildings, and we just have amazing customers around the world, and they become great reference accounts for us. And with that kind of brand, and obviously I know brand is near and dear to your heart, we have this opportunity to leverage our brand through our customers' brand that everybody knows.
Yeah.
And that to me is, I was just on the phone yesterday with Kroger, the world's largest grocer, 2,800 stores. It's massive. It's probably the largest cloud managed network on the planet. They run on Extreme. And if we have Kroger, we really could have anyone. So in terms of our enterprise customer focus, we have limitless opportunities for growth.
So what happens when Liverpool score? Because I love this.
By the way, when Liverpool scores, it's still nowhere close to a Taylor Swift concert.
Really? Don't tell me Taylor Swift
because the Swifties are, so think about like kind of what happens at a stadium where people are streaming streaming video, but Taylor Swift, everyone's down on the floor, like the players aren't streaming, but a Taylor Swift concert, everybody's down on they're down on the field and the stadium, and it's a constant streaming motion where that Wi-Fi system, and that's what we do. We do really complicated, complex systems, networking systems that includes wireless and wired, for these enterprise customers. But that's where, when you see the kinds of bandwidth, we're continuously breaking new records as we go forward because of the devices themselves and what the devices are capable of in terms of the quality of video, the quality of audio, and the bandwidth they chew up. And then just to, think about 100,000 people streaming inside of a bowl. I mean, that's a pretty interesting challenge, right? And nobody does it better than Extreme. And our teams do a phenomenal job with
I still want to know what happens when Liverpool score. What's the spike like?
Well, when they score, it's probably like, I'm just going to say it's probably a 10x from where,
Yeah.
when the game is going on, it's probably a 10x spike.
So all those
Um,
people in the stadium get frustrated if it doesn't work, but they love you. I mean, you're like so important in their lives to get that text through, to get that streaming video through.
if you have an old, and especially in Europe, a lot of the stadiums just haven't upgraded. And initially people said people don't want Wi-Fi. They focus on the game.
Yeah.
Well, as it turns out, people really do want Wi-Fi, and it's
Yeah.
changing the experience. And um, if you have old Wi-Fi that doesn't work, and then you get new Wi-Fi that hums, it's a game changer. And so people love like the high-speed Wi-Fi experience. And yeah, we have to be ready for the spikes.
Yeah.
Because they come, and yeah, they happen during goals. In the US, that happens with, if there's a touchdown or if there's a field goal, and you can watch the spikes and you can tell what's happening in the game.
Yeah. And so are you guys doing the Taylor Swift concerts as well, and Extreme? Are you having to move it to, or the stadium where she's performing is where you've got Extreme? That's how you know.
We have the stadium infrastructure.
Yeah.
So, when she's coming into one of our stadiums, if she's coming to, Gillette Stadium,
So do you have to up the capacity if she's going to perform at a stadium?
Now our networks are ready for her.
Oh. So you're Swift ready, Alan.
We're Swift ready, and actually that's what we're really good at. And then, but not only that, the network is highly intelligent. And I know we want to talk too much about Extreme here, but there's a lot of insights you can glean from what's going on in the network. I mean, for our customers, everything traverses the network, and most people are accustomed to the cellular network, which it's a wide area network. In our case, these are kind of local networks, and everything passes through the local network. And so it's very strategic in terms of what passes through there. And we can provide insights and analytics. And really what we're saying is, hey, this isn't just a bunch of hardware that's strung together to deliver Wi-Fi. We want to understand kind of what are you trying to drive in terms of the fan experience or customer outcomes. And in here, this is where we can come in and differentiate and create Extreme as it create a different level of customer intimacy, because we can come in and talk about, hey, how can we help you drive your customer outcomes, which is different than, hey, we want to buy a bunch of boxes and string them together and deliver Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I mean, there's one more thing I would. I mean, it feels like Extreme's going through a pivotal moment at the moment with the introduction of Platform One. And what's all that about? Is that a big change for the business, change of direction, or is it an add-on or a gentle evolution?
I would say it's an evolution. It's not an incremental change because of what I would call conversational AI will bring to the equation, and the scope of AI in terms of the use cases that we're bringing to the equation. So, and we've had what I would call generation AI, machine learning type solutions as part of our solution for a while. What does that mean? It means that, hey, from our cloud, we can see a lot of different network elements like access points, and if it starts exhibiting a certain behavior, we know it's going to fail. So let's send a trouble ticket. Let's order a new access point before it fails. So, hey, higher quality because we can see this machine. We know how it's going to behave. We can create a better experience because it never fails. Okay, that's good. Conversational AI, and what we're talking about is, hey, is there anything suboptimal in my network right now? Well, and now you start having a conversation.
Wow.
And then you say, hey, you've got some equipment that's configured a certain way, but it's not optimal. You could reconfigure it and drive higher performance. Oh, okay. Here's how to do it. Would you like me to do it? Would you like me to do it every time I see this suboptimal configuration? And what we say, what we talked about is like human in the loop, which is really important because AI is about trust. You're not just going to turn a network over to, an AI system. You want to make sure that you have control and you trust everything that's going on. So the idea that we have checkpoints, we say, Dave, like here's what's going on. Here's the recommended fix. Would you like me to do it or no? And you say, no, I'm going to do it. Okay. Well, then it starts happening more and more. And you say, all right, you give it a try. And then you automate it. So you start bringing enhanced automation into the equation. And the other thing we talk about at Canvas, where all of a sudden you have a platform and it's not just for a network manager. There are other people who are involved in, say, network planning and building. Hey, we're constructing a new building on campus. We'd like to outfit it with Wi-Fi. historically you run through a whole process and here's the floor plans and how do you want to design this? Well, now you can put the floor plans, into the platform and just ask it, configure a network. Now you have a network. Now, is it the final network? Probably not, but you just saved, weeks.
Yeah, yeah.
And now you have a network plan. And then you say, create a bill of materials for this network.
Wow.
So from like that's the network planning and commercially licenses. How do you manage the network? And you pay for licenses, and then what's the age of your equipment in the network? And yeah, you could just ask what licenses are expiring, this year, and procurement wants to know, and they can ask, and they can create their own canvas where that's what they see. So the procurement people can't manage the network, but they have access to information, from the platform that's useful. So, everything from network design and planning and implementation, management and orchestration. There's a lot of things that we can bring. We have some unique technology that we call our fabric technology that no one else has. Everyone has got a data center fabric, but we have this unique fabric for campuses. And now all of a sudden we're bringing that into our cloud as well, into Platform One, and so you have complete visibility, which is really exciting for people to understand. One, the visibility and configuration, and then orchestration of this really unique fabric technology that brings security benefits, performance benefits, and all of it's about efficiency, and it's changing the human experience, because at the end of the day, we're driving automation, and we're changing how people interact with networks.
And with the sort of increased use of AI, are you going to have to increase the technical abilities that you're putting on campus? Do you see a big volume increase in data coming, or
it's actually the other way around?
Is it?
Yeah. For what we're doing. So
yeah.
Now a lot of the, when you look at NVIDIA, and you look at some of our our competitors on the networking side, these are scaled up and scaled out, massive platforms supporting these large language models, and I would call that networking for AI, right?
Yeah.
So you have these big, GPU clusters, and all the connectivity requirements associated with these platforms. So that's what I'm talking about, is AI for networking. So this is like, hey, you're responsible for running an NHS trust hospital and healthcare organization. You now have an AI assistant that's always there. And we say, like, we want you to cheat on the test. You should always cheat on the test, right? Use this AI expert, because the AI expert will tell you, will give you the answer.
Yeah.
And so, take the answer. You can judge the answer if you want. And again, you can move along that trust continuum that we talked about. But here, all of a sudden, you can start automating tasks and functions, according to your trust level. And then you can start focusing on more complicated, complex problems. And so, in front of all of our, network engineers and administrators and CIOs in Paris, where, 1,000 people, the answer is that AI is not taking your job. AI is allowing you to focus on more complex and complicated tasks.
See, that's a great message, isn't it? And I was just about to ask you how you're thinking about that sort of challenge, because a lot of people are very frightened about AI taking their jobs. And in my own company, I can see it's going to give people back time, and we sell time. And that means that time can be used for better ideas. It can be used for building deeper relationships, spending more time with clients. It's going to save time. How do you sort of see that in extreme, and the impact of AI? I love what you just said, so I'm trying to build on that.
But it's interesting. I mentioned I was over in India, and we have, in Bangalore, we have 600 engineers. I was just over there, and we were doing a meeting with everybody in the room, and it's great to see everyone and to be live. But there's a lot of angst and questions about, hey, is AI going to take my job?
Yeah.
Like people raising their hands, saying, and we're saying, no, AI is going to make you a lot more efficient and a lot more productive in terms of what you can do. And it's going to elevate your skill set, because ultimately, we're going to be training and building, a team of, AI competent engineers, which obviously is a very important skill set in the market today. So, if you're working with Extreme, you're going to be on the leading edge in terms of working with kind of the most modern tools and technology for developing these systems and solution sets that we do.
When you think about people coming out of university or college now, do you want them AI enabled straight out of school?
If it's possible. I mean, I would say yes. One of the things that's interesting about hiring in the AI space is that, this generative AI, that and these new, we have an agentic AI platform. There's a master agent and subcontracting out to sub agents, highly accurate, systems around kind of what we do. Very few people will have, experience doing that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so we don't, and I think that's true for people in the market hiring for AI. But and then here's the funny thing: people use AI to write their resumes to indicate that they're AI savvy. So you have to be able to sort through to
Yeah, yeah.
understand, like, hey, wait a minute, AI created this AI resume and it's not real.
No, no, because I know some exec search firms instant if it's AI generated, they throw it out. Yeah, you've just
Yeah.
made me think actually the ones that are AI generated are the savvy ones.
Well, they're using AI,
Yeah,
whether or
yeah,
not, it's
yeah, yeah.
accurate or not. And then, there's security issues and, where's it coming from? But I would say the overarching answer is, yeah. I mean, we want people with AI experience. And by the way, it doesn't just relate to our solution to customers, which, is what all of our engineers work on. It's also how we run our business. And, we're going to be recognized, our marketing team and sales team are going to be recognized in Newsweek for being number one about how we're using AI to drive sales and marketing at the company. We created a tool that makes it really easy to say, hey, there's a new stadium and it's a stadium project. And here's the stadium, here's the project, here's what we know about it, how many seats and where it is, and overall requirements, and make me a proposal.
Mm.
And so, out comes this amazing proposal, leveraging all of our stadium, use cases. And if you're a salesperson, you now have a presentation that's been put together for you in about, less than a minute.
That's extraordinary.
And so being able to access like all of our customers and, access, from a deployment perspective, or if you think about, the tens of thousands of issues that have come into our technical support center, and all the resolutions of those issues that are all captured now, that's part of this engine
Mm.
now that has all that intelligence. So it's gotten, solving customer problems has gotten a lot easier. So
And they,
they're just how we're using AI just, is around, for the company. And then, obviously for our customers, and people are using it to write press releases and
yeah,
and
yeah,
earning scripts and
yeah,
earning scripts.
yeah. Well, I think I would, and then I'd just change it to my
It's a great
language.
first draft. It's a good
Yeah, yeah.
first draft.
That's the
Yeah,
way I
yeah,
think of it.
yeah.
And do you think it has the potential to make leaders better leaders?
I think it can make you more efficient in your, tasks, but I think leadership has got a lot of different elements, above and beyond how you're going to use AI. I don't know, maybe if you asked, what would you do in this situation?
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe you get some, you know, some interesting ideas from an AI platform.
Okay. But yeah, yeah, I think I might do that. I think I might do that. And now we're coming to the end of our time, and we always end these conversations with a little bit of fun. Now I know you are an ice hockey player and an ice hockey coach. Is that what you do to get the release of 24/7 leadership and all of the challenges? That sounds like a brutal game to me, but maybe it's not.
Well, I was kidding because I said, I lost my front teeth playing ice hockey as
Well,
a
you see,
kid.
you
So
prove
I
my
have,
point.
fun fact, I have, fake front teeth, but I really enjoyed, I mean, a lot of it. Look, I'm a family guy, and, I coach my girls. They have two daughters and a son, and I always wanted to be there with them on the weekends and coaching.
Yeah.
And then, my son got interested in ice hockey, and I played men's ice hockey, and I played growing up. And, we ended up that turns out to be quite a commitment, but, I got into that, and then, it was really fun. And they, there's so many parallels between coaching and management.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and you'll know this, but, when things get heated, with your leadership team, sometimes the behaviors of that leadership team can look a lot like
The 10-year-olds. No, no.
behaviors of 10-year-olds,
It's almost
just
like
calling
you've
it
heard
what it
me in
is.
private quoting.
I mean, people all go there, but hey, so it's kind of interesting that it's really, I think the coaching element really brings a lot of things to light, and I think it's helpful in a management
Yeah.
context. Ice hockey is a sport where I know they just had the Stanley Cup playoff, finals, and we have a winner. The Florida Panthers have just won the Stanley Cup. It's a team sport, and
Yeah.
that's what I like about ice hockey. And look, I have all the respect in the world for the tennis players, and by the way, that's become a team sport with all their teams
Yeah,
that
they have
that
big
are
teams now.
supporting them. But when you're out on the field, ice hockey is there's 5 skaters out there, and you can't hide, and it's all about everyone's watching you. And so if you're not hustling, everybody knows. When you're making a sacrifice for the team, everybody knows. So it's kind of the ultimate team sport.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of things that that I've taken from ice hockey kind of into the business world, because I would say the same thing is true at work. When someone puts in an amazing effort, that, right? Your teams know that. Like, this was an incredible effort that was put forward here to deliver. And if people are slacking off, people will see that as well.
Yeah.
And so
everybody knows.
Yeah. So
No,
anyway, that
great
was
parallel.
a great experience. Also, it was time for me to spend with my son and families, and all those people over the years became our very best friends. So.
No, and the family is the most important thing at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Oh, no. Well, it's been fabulous talking to you, Ed. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Again, 40 minutes has just evaporated.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure speaking with you and catching up. And I appreciate you having me here.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you ever so much. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Pivot Points. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more fascinating conversations with industry leaders in our previous episodes. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to know more about Brand Pi and how we deliver impact in the pivotal moments that matter to you, head over to brandpi.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.